The Embry-Riddle Center for Entrepreneurship presents the Entrepreneurship Journey speaker series. This speaker series gives viewers the opportunity to listen to Embry-Riddle affiliated entrepreneurs talk about their journey building their startup venture and lessons learned during the process. Welcome to the Embry-Riddle Upstart Hanger podcast, the Entrepreneurship Journey. Today we have our guest, Spencer Churchill. Spencer is a Embry-Riddle alumni, and he is the founder of the startup Pistachio. This company seeks to disrupt the real estate market using blockchain technology. Spencer, one of the questions I wanted to ask you today is how did you get started? I know you started here at Embry-Riddle, you're a recent graduate, but what led you to the Center of Entrepreneurship and to found your first company, Carnauba?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for having me. I really appreciate this. So actually, interestingly enough, my startup journey at Embry-Riddle started in my first night in my dorm. So when I was a freshman, I was in O'Connor. So there were 7 of us in my freshman dorm. And our first night that we spent together, the 7 of us sketched out on a piece of paper how we were going to build sort of like a next generation drone. So something that could be a mixture of fixed wing and quadcopter. And essentially what I realized is that I'm in an environment in which there's a lot of technical talent and surrounded by sort of the theme of aviation, right? Embry-Riddle is a phenomenal university known for, aviation. Yep. So I figured, okay, I am not technical, right? So I actually don't have any background in engineering, but I have probably a keen ability to identify problems. So I figured my time at Riddle should probably be best spent finding the problems that I really care about and problems that sort of industry really cares about, and then coupling that problem with the technical talent available at the university. So essentially what that led to is in my sophomore year, I started taking entrepreneurship courses at Riddle. So I took their sort of like sophomore level entrepreneurship class. And in that we were tasked with creating sort of a mock venture, going through all of the startup processes of identifying market and problem, all the discovery. What I found from that was that there's a large market of automotive service, of automotive service professionals. So all of the ancillary services that you have for your car, detailing, minor repair work, things like that. And none of them were using technology. They're sort of all run on on pencil and paper. So my first venture, Carnauba, was started with the idea that I was going to digitize all of their workflow. And then through the digitization, we'd be able to create value for them and then capture some of that value in the startup. So I went out, I sort of ran with that idea through the second level entrepreneurship class at Embry-Riddle. And that's when I began a great relationship with Dr. Bowers at the university. And then I started sort of venturing outside the university, specifically through the help of the Microplex. So they hooked me up with Starter Studio in Orlando. I ended up taking Carnauba through Starter Studio Seed Accelerator in Orlando, and I got hooked up with some technical talent. And basically what I've done is I've used the resources of the university to take myself through sort of the upstart of my first venture. We decided to actually close that venture and pivot. Coronavirus essentially shut down that entire industry. We were already sort of working in an industry that we were working in an industry that has done the sort of same thing the same way for a very, very long time. And they're an extremely risk averse group. So they run on a really slim margin. And so integrating something new into their business plan is extremely difficult. So we had a very difficult time with coronavirus sort of implementing and launching our product. but I learned a lot from that venture. So
Cool.
I'm taking those learnings and starting my new venture now.
So when you started you did your business model canvas and your value
Yep.
proposition canvas. How was
Yep.
what were the things that you found that you could add to your business when it comes to adding value to the customer? And what are some assumptions that you had before you made those the business canvas model that kind of you had to throw it out after completing the model?
Yeah. The business model canvas. I love the business model canvas.
Yeah.
I've probably gone through the business model canvas, especially for Carnauba. I probably went through at least 100 iterations of the business model canvas, because every time you finish it, you can immediately start it again and learn something new from just going through it. But essentially, the business model canvas is fantastic because it gives you a visualization of who is my customer, what is their problem, and then all of the actual things that you do as a startup, which are like, how do I solve the problem? Like really like down to like the nitty gritty of like, what are my customer relationships? Like, how do I actually bring the value to the customer? Exactly what value am I bringing to the customer? And then so my new workflow for the business model canvas and the value proposition canvas is that I'll do a business model canvas, I'll do a value proposition canvas, and then I started using a new canvas, which essentially helps map out your MVP.
Yeah. Right.
And so it uses the business model canvas and the value prop canvas to specifically design a roadmap for your MVP. So now I'll do those three things, and then I'll go back and start again. And before you go back and start again and sort of like do it over, you want to talk to customers and then try to get an idea of like, am I on the right track? Now, that is both the correct way to do it and the incorrect way to do it, because the best way to do it is like go through that process, build MVP, get MVP in the hands of customers, and then go through the process again. Basically, you're just trying to get more and more data because you're trying to take all the assumptions that you have and move them into a category where you can like begin getting data on them. Yep. And you can't really get the data without customers using your product. So in Carnauba, it was extremely difficult to do that because the level of MVP that we had to build was sort of like, I call it like a heavy MVP. So it's not a real MVP where it's like one little thing.
You tell everyone what MVP means.
Yeah, so it's minimal viable product. So what is the absolute most basic thing that I can get into the hands of my customer that provides some value? So something that they can use, something that solves like the most basic inherent problem that you're trying to solve, because otherwise you get lost in feature set. So it's like, I want to build a widget, or like, all right, so the classic example is somebody's trying to hang a picture frame with a nail in the wall. So your startup is designed on solving the problem of how do I get this nail into the wall?
Yeah.
Well, you can build the most complex hammer, right? And you say, oh, wouldn't it be great if a hammer could hammer the nail into the wall with one hit? So you design a hammer that weighs 300 pounds because the calculation says the hammer needs to be 300 pounds in order to get it in with one hit. And then all of a sudden you have a product that customers can't use. So you go through this long development cycle of building something, and then you put it into the hands of customers and they go, this is not what I need. And then all of a sudden your startup's out of money and you die. Yeah. So the MVP is a way to build something very, very basic, get it into the hands of customers, and then your customer will say, oh, you know what would be fantastic is I have this other problem. Can you solve that one too?
Yeah. Great.
Yeah, so that's MVP.
Great. And so, you're the winner of Trep Expo at Embry-Riddle. Tell us about your experience there.
Yeah, I got the big check.
Yeah.
Yeah, big check on the wall. So Trep Expo is awesome. So now that I'm a little further along and I've had the opportunity to pitch real venture capital firms in that environment. So that's sort of like a long pitch, 20 or 30 minutes delving like really deep. Before you ever get to that sort of stage, you have to really, really develop what is my 30-second pitch. Like if I were to see a venture capitalist at a Starbucks, what are the words that I could say to them to get that 30-minute meeting?
Yeah.
So Trep Expo is a great opportunity to essentially have a room filled with entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, people in industry. So it brings together the environment of that, and then it helps you sort of hone your ability of what does my startup do? Like, what is the problem that we solve? How large is the customer segment that I'm trying to solve it for? And then sort of like you maybe have 5 seconds in that 30 of saying like how you solve it, because that really doesn't matter because that will change over time. But sort of the things that won't change are who are your customer base and what problem are you solving?
Cool.
Yeah, so Chef Expo is a phenomenal resource for student startup founders, basically.
Great. And then now that you're on your new venture, Pistachio, please tell us like more about that.
Yeah, so Pistachio is really exciting for me. So I started working as a real estate agent in the state of Connecticut, and just through becoming a real estate agent, my entrepreneurial mind sort of has gone crazy down a million different paths. But essentially, what I've settled on is Pistachio. So Pistachio is a technology-focused real estate brokerage firm, and we use blockchain and machine learning to essentially bring the transaction cost down of a real estate sale. And then we also have a change in business model. So basically, Pistachio is a real estate brokerage firm that uses non-commissioned agents and a blockchain transaction to allow home sellers to sell their homes for 2% total commission fee.
That's really good. It seems like, every situation, career you find yourself in, you're always finding problems that you can solve. So that's the entrepreneurship spirit right there.
Yeah, I can't shut it off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you like being, in charge of your own venture? What are like the pros and cons that you have every single day dealing with a startup?
Yeah.
Stage right now.
So the pro and the con are the same thing. You are fully in charge of your destiny, right? So there's a lot of security that comes with a job, just like sort of like emotional security of, twice a month I'm going to get a paycheck. And so I'm guaranteed to build a lifestyle around like I can pay my rent and buy food.
Yeah.
So when you're a venture, an early stage sort of startup founder, you're balancing like what are the things that I need to do during the day to ensure that I can like pay rent, and then what are the things that I'm going to do to accelerate my company fast enough to be able to eventually work full time. So I'm really lucky that I'm currently working in industry, the industry that my startup is in. So I'm essentially using that twofold. So I'm using it for income, and I'm using it to learn like the really nitty gritty about the industry. But I will say this, like it definitely takes a certain type of person to be able to leave the comforts of a normal job to start a startup. But the nice thing is that using the MVP model, you're de-risking the entire situation. So you can have a full day job and work on your startup only at night, using sort of like all of the entrepreneurial tools that we have now, including development tools, right? There's a ton of open source code that takes the time in which it takes to get an MVP out the door. It takes no time now and much less technical talent. So you can put together a great team, only work at night, and get an MVP out the door just to validate, am I even solving a problem that the real world has, without taking really any risk. So right now, that's essentially how I split up my day. I work the majority of like sort of like a normal work day as a real estate agent, and then every other hour that I'm awake, I'm trying to work on Pistachio. It's I think it definitely takes a certain type of person, and then it comes along with the balance of everything else that comes in life, right? So personal relationships and family time and extracurriculars and whatever you're doing. But one thing that I'm really glad that I did was that I started my first venture while I was in college. I think there's absolutely no better time to like take a massive risk, like starting a startup, than when you have sort of the buffer of college behind you. Plus you're getting a degree. So that's de-risking the situation even more. So if things don't work out, you can get a job. It's not it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
But
And,
yeah.
oh, you're going to say something?
No, sorry, go ahead.
Okay. So I wanted, because I know like funding is always like a big issue when it comes to like startups, right?
That is true.
Everyone needs money, right? But what about human capital? You know, how difficult is it to find the right people?
Yeah. Okay. So I would say, from my experience, finding human capital is more difficult than finding, monetary capital. It is something that I'm focusing really, really, really hard on this startup, is finding especially the right technical people. So, it's difficult to convince somebody who has the right skills to come work on your startup.
Yeah.
And that's sort of because, it's opportunity cost. So, what is the opportunity cost of me going to work for this startup versus doing anything else? And so it takes a lot to bring on really talented technical people. I think the way that I'm handling it this time versus sort of in my previous ventures is I'm looking for somebody who maybe has a real interest in the problem that I'm solving and has the technical talent. And I'm not necessarily looking for somebody to like quit their day job right away because of sort of all of the rest of the structure that I've put in place. So it's essentially, it's another de-risking scenario of trying to de-risk having somebody come onto your team. But I will say also this time, the focus on the team that I'm building is 100% more important than my plans for how I'm going to raise capital. I've sort of gone through the process of raising capital enough now that I really have a firm, grasp on that. And so I'm focusing this time on how can I build an absolutely stellar team that's really nimble to be able to solve the problems that we're trying to solve now.
Great. And as a small entrepreneurship too, like, what advice do you have to give people on like raising capital?
Raising capital. Okay, so my advice is get as far as you can before you ever have to raise, because it makes raising way easier. Any little tiny piece of evidence that you have a real problem and have some ability to solve that problem immediately opens the door for the conversation of capital. Because in the way that investors look at it, it's not like they're not giving out capital for you to prove out a problem. They're giving out capital for you to scale the solution that you have. And I mean, that's true for like true venture capital. If you're raising a friends and family round, right, it's you're going to raise maybe $250,000 from friends and family that just believe in you. They do not expect really to get that money back. And I'd probably say like 99% of the time they don't get that money back. Yeah. But really raising capital from like a VC firm is 100% about what data do you have to prove that you have a problem and that you have solved a piece of that problem, and then with their money, you're going to be able to continue to solve that problem and scale your solution. So get as far as you can without any money. And the way that you do that is you build a really, really robust team and you use as much open source code as you can. Because there's basically no problem that you could try to solve from a software startup standpoint. This is very different when you're talking about biotech or talking about a hard tech. Right? If you're trying to build a rocket company, it's going to be really difficult to prove out any sort of solution without any capital.
Yeah.
From that standpoint, I don't have any experience, right? So all the startups that I work on are software startups, and I'm sure you'll talk to people with experience in creating hard tech startups. But yeah, essentially it's just get as far as you can, as much data as you can, because that data is proof. And that's what VC firms want. They want proof that you and your team, are capable.
Definitely. That's really interesting. As far as like taking entrepreneurship classes at Riddle, you told me that you took in Entrepreneurship 1, Entrepreneurship 2, and I know we both took a class together,
Yeah.
the special topics class
Yeah.
for the NASA transfer technology project. So how have those classes helped you in your entrepreneurship journey?
Yeah, those classes were my introduction to sort of formal entrepreneurship. So there's there's a million different types of entrepreneurs. There's entrepreneurs that take a business that's given to them, or they inherit a business, and then they sort of like have an entrepreneurial spirit where they can grow that business into something bigger. And then there's sort of like founders that wing everything, right? They happened upon a problem. They happened upon the ability to solve that problem, sort of like Facebook. Happened upon a problem that they really didn't understand what that problem even was for a very long time.
Yeah.
But they had the technical ability to build it. So, in the early stages of a company like that, there was absolutely zero formal entrepreneurial training. And then there's sort of the startups that come out of universities. So, all the startups that were, founded by college grads, the Harvard MBA program is sort of notorious for breeding billion-dollar startups, same as Stanford.
Yeah.
And what that is it's like, how do you give somebody who's maybe not technical the tool set to be able to identify problems? So these are things like the business model canvas. Sort of as you dive deeper, there's like 50 other canvases that are used in startups. The right books to read and what to get out of them. And then you sort of end up building really deep relationships with the professors that teach those courses, right? So I've been really lucky to build some phenomenal relationships, with a variety of different professors at Riddle, and sort of that is equally as important as sort of the content of the class.
Yeah.
But the nice part about those classes is they give you a zero risk environment to sort of identify a startup. Basically, start a startup, no risk, and see what happens. And
Yeah.
I think that's great, because I think sort of the one of the biggest fears around starting a startup is like, well, what if it doesn't go well? Then I've spent money and spent time and all this stuff. So it's like, yeah, take an entrepreneurship course at your university, and de-risk the situation and just try it. There's no reason not to.
Yeah. And is that what led you down the path of entrepreneurship?
I've had entrepreneurship in my blood for a very, very long time.
Okay.
My dad definitely instilled in me. It's actually kind of funny. So I think my dad was an early adopter of podcasts.
Okay.
I remember him having like the original iPod, the big like white brick iPod, and playing podcasts in the car, like when we would drive around. So, and we would listen to an economics podcast that was sort of like startup-y, but it was before all the real like startup terms, I think.
Yeah.
And so I think from a very young age, I've had entrepreneurship ingrained in my blood, but it's like, how do you go from like having ideas to like trying to build a startup? So
Yeah.
I think that's where the sort of university environment has got me to where I am now.
Great. So I think that's all the questions I had for you, but
Awesome.
thank you for joining us on this show today, and wish you good luck on your new startup, Pistachio, and congratulations on winning second place at Launch Adventure too. That was a really good
Thanks.
accomplishment there. Cool.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.